So I was visiting a couple of years later, when I was, 23 perhaps. I was visiting a friend of mine who was in residence here at the MacDowell Colony, a very good young composer named Bill Flanagan. I was visiting, and I was impressed by everything that was going on, thinking that maybe someday I'll get invited to the MacDowell Colony, maybe, if I stop writing poetry, perhaps. And I was wandering around the wonderful grounds, and I spied a shortish, balding man lurking in some pine trees. I knew who he was, and I wanted him, even though he wasn't a poet, he was a writer, and I wanted him to read my poetry. I had learned that no matter where I went, I always carried a small suitcase with me of my work. You never knew when it was going to come in handy. So I had committed many, many more poems by then, and I grabbed a handful of some of the newer ones and searched him out, and I found him lurking under another pine tree somewhere. And I went into my act, and I said, "My name is Edward Albee, I'm a poet, read these," and thrust them at him, and he took them, and I guess he was a quick read, because the next day he found me lurking under some other trees, and he said, "Albee, I have read all of these poems. I want to take you out and get you drunk." Well, you know what I thought, of course. Since the time I had shown my poetry to Auden, it had undergone a sea change and was now of a magnificence that could not be discussed sober. Turned out not to be the case. The guy just liked to drink a little bit. So he took me out in some beat-up little car to one of the many pondlets that dot the New Hampshire countryside, and with a bottle of bourbon. And as the sun was setting, and as the level of the bottle of bourbon was settling, he discussed each of my poems with me. He did something I thought rather odd. Every time he finished discussing one of my poems, whether he did this on purpose or not, I don't know. Maybe the first time was accident. He sort of slipped it into the water. And by the time he had finished going over these 20 or 30 poems of mine, the entire surface of the pond was covered with foolscap. Foolscap indeed. This man, whose name was Thornton Wilder, when you're that young, you dare anything. When you're that young, you will show your work to the great because you feel that they deserve the experience of your work.